Welcome back to the series of videos about the life of Buddha Shakyamuni broadcast. In episode 12, we heard about the journey of Prince Siddhārtha after leaving Rajaga. He continued to search for the truth and met the teacher, Alara Kalama, quickly reaching the highest level of meditation that this teacher could teach. Not satisfied, Siddhārtha continued to seek the teacher, Uddaka Ramaputta, and also quickly reached the realm of neither perception nor non-perception. Although invited to succeed him as guru, Siddhārtha refused, realizing that these meditative states did not yet lead to complete liberation. He decided to continue his own search. During this journey, he met 5 ascetics led by Kondanya, who recognized Siddhārtha's potential for enlightenment and asked to become his disciples. This volume emphasizes Siddhārtha's relentless determination in his search for ultimate truth, surpassing the highest meditative achievements of the time, and begins to attract companions on his spiritual path. The Life of the Buddha, Episode 13, The Ascetic Journey, Siddhārtha's New Path. From the outskirts of Rajaga, going southwest, 6 or 7 days later they came to the Naranjara River. This was an area of fields, ponds, and swamps, so the journey was quite difficult. Here and there were villages, with a fairly dense population, whose life seemed more prosperous than the countryside outside Kapilavatthu where he lived. Siddhārtha had consulted many places, representing many different schools and groups of monks, especially having just passed the 2 highest meditation attainments of the time, but still could not solve the deepest problems of the inner self. Perhaps learning is the same everywhere. Why not seek within yourself, explore the path through your own efforts? In just a few days, like a shadow following Siddhārtha Gautama, the 5 fellow monks felt strongly attracted by his language, gestures, and demeanor. Only Kondanya had attained the 3rd level of meditation. The other 4 had only reached the 1st and 2nd levels of meditation, so they wanted him to lead them to higher levels. Siddhārtha happily instructed them. So every night, in the deserted temple, under the trees, Siddhārtha Gautama guided his friends with great care and explained in great detail, concisely, and more easily than their teachers. Finding a shallow stretch of river, they crossed the Naranjara River, and after a short distance, they came to a mountain range belonging to the Uruvela tribe. Far below the foot of the mountain was a bustling town with a military citadel belonging to the Magadha Empire, guarding the southwest of the capital. Looking over the general terrain of the mountains and rivers, the rugged rocky slopes, perhaps containing many natural caves, Siddhārtha Gautama said to his friends, "The monsoon season is coming, with rain and storms. Perhaps this is the most convenient place for us to stop. We can both practice and beg for food to make a living." A day later, everyone had settled into their monastic quarters. Each had his own cave not far from the other. Kondanya gave Siddhārtha Gautama the best cave. It had a canopy of flowering vines and a flat rock inside. The only trouble was cleaning up the bat droppings. The first day they went begging. They saw that there was too much food, rice, cakes, bananas, sticky rice, curry sauce. They couldn't eat it all, so they had to put it on a rock outside the cave to give to monkeys, squirrels, birds. Siddhārtha suggested eating less. From now on, they would take turns. Only 2 people going begging would be enough to feed 6 mouths for now. They should save time to practice. Everyone agreed. They considered Siddhārtha as a master, so they wanted him to just sit and practice. So, sitting quietly in the relatively cool mountain valley for several consecutive days and nights, Siddhārtha Gautama reviewed all his knowledge, as well as examined all his spiritual experiences. He saw that the Vedic thought, the highest achievement of which was in the Vedas, still had many shortcomings in the field of self-realization. The Upanishads were clearly a later addition, so the philosophical system seemed more complete. The sects belonging to the tradition were governed by an immortal Atman, so they could not thoroughly explain the good and evil, right and wrong, good and bad in this world. As for the arguments from the ideological systems of the Vedic descendants, they were like blind men touching an elephant. They were only fragments, patches of reality, not yet reality. In some places, they were partial, imposed, one-sided. Outside of the tradition, due to extreme reactions, too many wild theories arose. Only the ignorant believe in their agnostic, skeptical, fatalistic, nihilistic, and sophistic theories. And worst of all is the crude, mechanical materialist who is everywhere in the capital city of Rajagaha. In his own experience, Siddhārtha saw one thing clearly. Thoughts and perceptions are a continuous flow, successive drops of water born and died. From them arise insecurity, agitation, worry, anxiety, fear. When entering the levels of meditation, the streams of feelings, perceptions, and thoughts gradually calm down, then stop. Because of the cessation, there is peace and bliss. But when leaving meditation, those streams flow again. They interact with external objects, and the situation remains exactly the same. There is real calmness and clarity, but the dirt is still at the bottom of the soul. Then Siddhārtha Gautama went in and out, up and down the levels of meditation to observe, once, twice more. Because he was quite proficient, now he only needed to initiate and then stay with his mind to be able to enter concentration easily. Here he drew a conclusion. This is only a temporary state of calm, not the ultimate, the complete thing. I must practice many different ways to contemplate to see what is right, what is wrong, what resolves the inner self thoroughly, and what is not thorough. Siddhārtha continued to think. The practice of asceticism must have some value. If it has no value, why is it maintained, exists, and is so popular in the world? Is it based on any possible truth? In Siddhārtha Gautama's mind suddenly appeared three images as three examples. First, just as a green tree immersed in water cannot be rubbed to produce fire. Similarly, a person who immerses himself in the water of sensual pleasures of the five senses cannot elevate his spirit, let alone attain the noble Dharma. Second, just like a green tree lying on the water's edge, do not hope, do not make vain efforts to rub it to make fire. Similarly, there are monks and Brahmins who have left home, wanting to escape the world, but often lie near the five sense pleasures, longing for the five sense pleasures, then it is difficult to attain the noble realms. Third, like a dry tree trunk, completely devoid of sap, located high above the water's edge. If one wants to make fire, one can rub it with very little effort, without much difficulty. Likewise, those ascetics and Brahmins who have abandoned the pleasures of the five senses are no longer under the control of the pleasures of the five senses, and yet wish to dry up the water of the pleasures of the five senses. They will attain the supreme dharmas, complete liberation. Finally, Siddhārtha Gautama thought again, I have left the five sense pleasures, left but not yet destroyed. So I will try to practice to drain the water of the five sense pleasures and see. I must practice right within myself, then I will know whether it is right or wrong. Siddhārtha Gautama then met his friends, presented all his arguments, perceptions, and experiences of cultivation and attainment, and then concluded, I want to practice the path of body control, of total control of all feelings according to the ancient ascetic tradition. What do you think? Because they trusted their teacher, the fellow practitioners all nodded in agreement. Being a tropical forest at the end of the dry season, the trees began to lose their leaves. Here and there, in clusters and areas, the tall sala trees still stood tall and green. Along the sparse forest, close to the foot of the hill to the banks of the Niranjara River, were patches of green and yellow vegetation. Clumps of herbaceous plants, flowering plants, still had sparse leaves. As for the bamboos, they were dense, growing wildly and disorderly, but they were very green and cool along the riverbank. The forest scene is not very beautiful or romantic. The quietness is also relative because many animals come and visit. In the caves, in the crevices of rocks, in the treetops, bats hang like black velvet bags. At night they fly around, buzzing in the air to hunt for prey, catch bugs, eat fruit. Occasionally weasels fly from tree to tree. Squirrels of all kinds and colors run and jump, climb or slowly eat seeds, bite roots. Every now and then a group of black monkeys, a group of red-brown monkeys, a group of yellow-gray monkeys appear to cause trouble, screaming and chirping. They carry their babies, lead their females, and play everywhere. They come like a storm and leave, returning the quiet to the silent forest. On the flat land, with yellow grass, a group of antelopes pass by. Their colors are very beautiful, leisurely nibbling on the remaining leaves. Herds of deer also passed by, their bodies thin and emaciated from the scarcity of food. Birds of all kinds sang continuously, playing tunes and periods. Some had clear, high-pitched, shrill voices, then flew away in other directions. Siddhārtha Gautama stayed in the cave during the storms and the first rains of the season. The outside world did not disturb him. At this time, there was only one person left to go begging, and they limited the food so that each person's portion was only the size of a fist. Despite the howling wind and rain, Siddhārtha continued to persevere in his method of taming his body. He clenched his teeth and pressed his tongue against the roof of his mouth to suppress his mind. It was like a strong man using all his strength to press down on the head and neck of a weak person, not allowing him to struggle or move. Likewise, he suppressed his mind, not allowing any wandering thoughts to arise. When he did so, due to the loss of too much strength, his body became hot and sweat poured out of his armpits. However, despite his strong determination and extraordinary willpower, his wandering thoughts did not stop, and he could not find peace of mind. Siddhārtha Gautama then turned to the method of taming his body by holding his breath for as long as possible. While practicing like that, he heard terrible pain from inside his head because of the sound of wind coming through his two ears, like a blacksmith's pipe going up and down. Holding his breath again, a fierce wind blew in his head, stabbing and gouging into his brain as if someone had taken a hammer and split his head into many pieces, and blood oozed from his ears, a fierce pain. However, persevering, increasing his willpower, he held his breath for a longer time, and his head ached as if someone had taken a red-hot iron ring and squeezed it tightly. However, Siddhārtha Gautama still endured, trying to hold his breath longer. Now, perhaps his head had become numb to sensation. The pain suddenly stabbed deep into his stomach. Like a skilled butcher cutting a cow, he thrust the sharp blade into his stomach, then slid the blade to his two ribs. The pain seemed to have reached its peak. Holding his breath again, from his stomach, the terrible pain spread throughout his entire body, just as if someone had grabbed his body, placed it on a hot coal stove, and turned it back and forth to roast it. Every sensation in his body, perhaps, was beyond its endurance. Siddhārtha felt that he was still unyielding, but he was only sad that he still could not find peace of mind. After more than 4 months of practicing breath-holding, Siddhārtha sat motionless like a stone statue. There were some devas nearby talking to each other. Perhaps the monk Gautama is dead? Not dead, but dying. Not dead, not dying. That is the practice of an arhat. As for the 5 fellow monks, they also practiced holding their breath like that, but to a very limited extent. They could not go as far as Siddhārtha Gautama. Therefore, their respect for him increased by 1 level. Seeing that the practice of holding one's breath did not bring the desired results, he abandoned the cave and went to a deserted, remote place deep in the forest. Now that the rainy season had passed, it had passed so quickly because he was deeply absorbed in his practice that he had no idea of time, so he wanted to sit outside, in the cold that was almost freezing. Siddhārtha Gautama thought that in the solitude of the jungle there was something that made people terrified, making their hair stand on end. He had to go and sit there to see how fear came, how it threatened, how it terrorized. He had to overcome all fear, no matter where it came from, and then he could talk about practicing to attain higher achievements. Then he sat in the deep dark night, no moon, no stars, only the rustling wind and the cold air that grew colder as the night wore on. A branch snapped and rattled. He imagined a ferocious yaksha, baring its teeth, slowly and cautiously approaching him. Fear rushed in, chilling his spine and then running through his body, up to the top of his head, and his teeth suddenly stiffened. Siddhārtha sat still, his will firm and steadfast, sitting still with one mind to listen to that fear. After a while, the fear gradually dissipated. Warmth returned to his body. The fear was gone. In the dark night, the shadow of something was rustling in the reeds. A python? Yes, a huge python that made the branches and leaves sway, intending to swallow him. Then a strong, fishy smell spread. Fear rushed over him like a strong wind, a moment later making him weak and paralyzed. Weak, paralyzed, he listened steadfastly. Fear had assimilated his whole body and mind, leaving only one mass. Listening, motionless, persistent. A moment later, fear loosened, like untying a knot, saying goodbye to him and leaving without a trace. Then, night after night, there were nights when the starlight paled, the hooting of an owl, the shadow of a deer passing by, the the sound of a bat flying overhead, the howling of a gibbon, the beep-beep of a tiger somewhere in his ear. They all brought fear to him. Sometimes his stomach clenched. Sometimes his heart pounded. Sometimes he broke out in sweat. Sometimes his whole body was as stiff as stone. Siddhārtha Gautama took note of them all, felt them all, and even though his fear was extreme, he still sat still, not moving. Oh, he thought, when fear affects the mind, if the mind is weak, feeble, then the body will be swept away. Thus, body and mind are subject to the law of correlation. In other cases, although body and mind are correlated, the mind is afraid, the body is affected, but if the will is steadfast, the fear will be released. Both body and mind are freed from their chains. Thus, is there something in the correlation that looks at the correlation? That strange flash of thought made Siddhārtha smile. Indeed, the lonely mountains and forests are hard to bear, hard to endure, but they are also the best places to meditate, to contemplate the hidden, deep movements in our hearts. The cold season had come. With only a thin piece of clothing, Siddhārtha Gautama could still maintain his asceticism easily. His 5 companions sometimes got restless and had to light a fire. They confessed that they could not be as diligent and steadfast as he was. Siddhārtha Gautama told them that it was fortunate that we found a forest in north-central India. If we went north, the ascetics in the snowy mountains would have to endure much more severe cold. As the days passed, the bodies of the 6 people were reduced to emaciated skeletons. When their daily food was reduced to oranges and guavas, the 5 friends were all exhausted and fainted. Siddhārtha Gautama advised his friends not to share their portion with him anymore, and he wanted to eat only what he could find, such as a few handfuls of leaves, vegetables, or fruits from somewhere. Before the cold season was over, Siddhārtha's old clothes were already torn to shreds, and his clay bowl had been broken by the monkeys. The day before yesterday, walking from the forest to the edge of the river, Siddhārtha wanted to meditate in the middle of the cemetery of white bones, when he suddenly saw a cloth wrapped around a corpse. Looking closely, it was the body of a woman whose face was no longer clearly visible. The body was rotten. He pulled the cloth out. The cloth was still good. He went down to the river to bathe, washed the cloth, temporarily wrung it dry, and then hung it on a bush. With just a few movements, he was trembling, groping, and lying limply on the edge of the river. When the sun rose, Siddhārtha woke up, wrapped the cloth around himself, and staggered to a forest further away. Spring passed, summer came. Day by day, Siddhārtha ate very little and sat outside in the scorching sun. If he could get through the cold, he could also get through the heat. He experimented. Now he only drank a little water to see how hunger and lack of food tortured his body. Then the body dried up and shriveled up. Because he ate so little, when he touched his stomach, he touched his back. Wherever he reached, his hair fell out in clumps. However, Siddhārtha also tried lying on sharp thorns, tried standing without sitting, tried squatting on his heels for many days without changing his dignity. 5 days later, Siddhārtha no longer bathed, but he vowed to eat whatever he could find. The cloth that bound the corpse was torn, so he used tree bark, straw, dry grass, leaves to wrap around his body. Sometimes he would sit in a pile, a rock in the cemetery or on the cow pasture. Naughty children would come and spit on him, urinate on him, or stand far away to throw dirt, stones. No matter how he was tortured, the other man remained motionless, not speaking, not screaming, not reacting in any way. They would come closer, slowly picking at his ears with a blade of grass. There were times when he escaped into the deep forest, no longer hearing or wanting to see the shadow of humans. His 5 fellow monks still maintained a little bit of food, so they could still see a little movement of life. As for him, after many years of extreme asceticism, they could no longer see the Siddhārtha of the past. His arms and legs were black bamboo segments, twisted together. His buttocks looked like 2 buffalo hooves. His spine and spinal column protruded like a string of beads. His ribs protruded, clearly visible like the rafters of a dilapidated house. His pupils were sunken deep into his eye sockets like deep wells. His scalp was wrinkled like a dried bitter melon. His back and abdomen were stuck together. If he wanted to defecate or urinate, he had to fall face down on the ground, and it took a long time to get up. At this time, the 5 fellow practitioners were filled with admiration. The devas discussed among themselves, "What color is the skin of the monk Gautama? Green, no, indigo, no, it's black, blue, gray, and indigo all mixed together. What about the body? It's a skeleton. How is the skeleton still alive, called living skeleton?" There was a greater and more majestic deity who said, "Do not talk nonsense. Look at his supreme will and determination. In the future, he will surely achieve the path of immortality." Since the bait of the holy wheel-turning king was still unable to seduce Siddhārtha Gautama outside the gates of Kapilavatthu, Mara watched his every step, every breath, every thought. For nearly 6 years, Mara saw that the indomitable, resilient son never had a moment of discouragement or weakness, like a tree whose roots had sunk so deep into the ground that no storm could shake it. Then as time passed, it seemed that his steadfast, courageous will had become even stronger. "Look," Mara said to himself, even when his asceticism had reached its final stage, only a skeleton remained. The gods were discussing among themselves, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. He was still as Mount Sineru, so he would become a Buddha. Now I must choose sweet words to make him give up his asceticism. "O monk," said the devil, "look at your emaciated, weak, ugly body. There, only one part of life is hanging on to 1,000 parts of death. Wake up and stand up, O monk. Life is extremely precious. A blade of grass wants to live. An ant wants to live. Only by living can we do this and that which is useful to ourselves and to the world. The monk can continue to live the life of a hermit, nourish his body, and make offerings to the fire god. Making offerings to the fire god is an act of supreme faith that brings many noble blessings in the future." Just by listening to the tongue, without looking, without directing the mind, Siddhārtha Gautama knew that it was the devil. He wanted to teach it a lesson. "Hey Namuchi, you are an evil, cunning person who still pretends to be kind and friendly. You are the representative of darkness, ignorance, cruelty, deceit, and sin. You have come here not for my benefit, but for your own base desires and dark ambitions for power. Do not talk to me about merit and blessings. I know how I practice. The god of fire is a worldly superstition created by false priests. Do not play the sacred game to bewitch the ignorant masses. I have a very firm faith, Sada. I have a very strong effort and diligence, Viriya. I have a very careful control, attention, and monitoring of the mind, Sati. I have a calmness and concentration that is difficult to be disturbed, Samadhi. I have a mindfulness, alertness, and understanding of the entire operation of the body and mind. With such power, you still come here to try to sway and sweet-talk me? There is one thing you said right, O Demon King. If the wind blows forever, or the fire burns forever, the 4 elements will be out of harmony. If the wind stops blowing, the fire goes out, the 4 elements will perish. Right now, I know clearly that the fire in me has cooled down, the water in me has dried up. When the water dries up, the fire cools down, my blood will dry up. When the blood dries up, the bile will dry up, and the flesh will shrivel up like a dried squash. This is in accordance with the law of having nothing to nourish the material substance. However, when the body is freed from desire, the spirit will no longer be imprisoned or enslaved, and thus the spirit will be sublimated, light, pure, and untainted. The purer the mind is, the more stable the concentration is. The more stable the concentration is, the clearer the wisdom is. Surely you know that too? I am a sentient being of flesh and blood. I also know pain, struggle, and writhe when hunger torments me. However, I will win. I will hang a bunch of munja grass on the flag of will. I would rather die in glorious spiritual battle than live in disgrace and defeat. You go now." So the Demon King once again lost and left dejectedly. As if his will was further strengthened, this steadfast and indomitable man refused to give up. Sometimes he sat in one place, letting the sun, rain, wind, and dew torment him. He would only pick up whatever was within reach to eat, including young cow dung. If there was nothing around, he would fast from day to day. Siddhārtha had not eaten or drunk anything for many days when a voice clearly echoed in his ear. If the monk Siddhārtha did not eat anything, the gods would let the food permeate his pores. "That is not right," Siddhārtha replied. "That would be like me being a liar." Then the monk Gautama should eat again, otherwise he will die in 3 days. I am not afraid of death. The monk Gautama is indeed not afraid of death. But what about the path of immortality? Has the monk attained the supreme fruit as he vowed in the past? Siddhārtha shuddered, and as if coming to his senses, a thought arose in him. Asceticism. I have also practiced asceticism to the utmost. I have also exhausted the 5 sense pleasures in me, so that my body has no more feeling, but my mind is not at peace. In the past, present or future, if any ascetic or Brahmin has practiced asceticism, endured all kinds of pain, agony, fierceness, and terror, perhaps he will not be better than me. I have experienced the relationship between body and mind. They are inseparable. Torturing the body, in this way, also means torturing the mind. Asceticism, according to my insight and deep contemplation, is a wrong method. As if reading Siddhārtha's mind, Saka, wanting to strengthen his correct perception, like a strong man stretching his arm, appeared in the Uruvela forest in the form of a wandering coward holding a 3-stringed lute. The wandering musician, as if by accident, sat on a rock under a tree and began to test the strings. The first string was too loose, so the boom, boom sound was not good at all. The musician smiled, and when he reached the second string, he tightened it so much that the string snapped. When he reached the third string, he carefully, slowly, tightened it, but slowly, to the right level, just right. Then he played a piece of music. Oh my! The sound was like each clear pearl vibrating in space. Then it was melodious, high and low, clear like the voices of birds playing in harmony, like the myriad melodies of spring. Then the wandering musician left the rock, walking and playing and singing. Oh, the sound of the guitar, the music, the lyrics, seemed to blend together, blend, be joyful, happy, flowing out, seeping into the clouds and sky, seeping into every tree tip, blade of grass, gradually fading away and disappearing. Siddhārtha sat quietly. The sunlight was thin and gentle, gently caressing his dry, dark skin. A pleasant, peaceful feeling penetrated his soul. If the string is too loose, it cannot be played. If it is too tight, it will break. When the string is stretched to the right degree, the right level, then the sound is perfect. Siddhārtha remembered that, as a child, when he went to attend the rice cultivation ceremony with his father, he could enter the first jhana by simply sitting and breathing calmly. During the 5 months of practicing the 4 stages of meditation under the Master Alara, he sometimes dwelt deeply in joy. Because the body was happy and fresh, the mind was also happy and fresh. Thus, there is a kind of food, joy, that nourishes the mind, so the body is also healthy, light, and comfortable. And since reaching the formless levels of meditation, we have abandoned joy, only having a feeling of balanced equanimity, and living in the world of emptiness, of consciousness, of subtle thoughts. Then he thought further. Life, what is this thing called life? If it is called life, it must be the whole of reality, the whole of body and mind, that is, the whole of form, feeling, perception, will, and consciousness. Why then do I want to give up this, to seek that? Why have I ever wanted to give up feeling, to live only with the thought? And what is asceticism? Is it the annihilation of the body? Do I want to destroy the body? And even if I had completely eradicated feeling in the body to the point of almost death, what would I have gained? If the string is stretched, it will break. As if finding the answer, he slowly stood up, gently looking around. Taking a deep breath, he suddenly smelled the fragrant scent of the forest. Many beautiful flowers bloomed that he had not seen for a long time. A golden squirrel suddenly puffed up its tail in the tree hole, peeping out its eyes at him. Siddhārtha bent down to look at himself. He was truly unrecognizable. The bark and leaves were all torn to shreds. Only the dry skeleton remained, hanging from the joints. The beautiful golden skin with an extraordinary appearance was now clearly the ghost of a hungry ghost. I must find a piece of cloth to wrap a corpse that is still intact, go down to the river to bathe and clean myself. Then I will begin my monastic life according to the wandering musician's advice, which means not too loose and not too tight. Finding a stick, he slowly dragged himself to the other side of the cemetery. After 5 or 7 steps, he had to stop to catch his breath. Finally, he reached the place. He had searched and found it. Oh, a yellow cloth wrapped around a corpse of unknown gender that had been thrown away long ago. He whispered, "Give me the cloth that you no longer use. In a few days, your body will return to the 4 elements." He pulled the cloth, had to use strength, breathing heavily to get the cloth out. The cloth was stained with blood, with dried pus. Siddhārtha went to the riverbank, leaned against some rocks on the riverbank, washed his robe, dried it on the rocks, then bathed and scrubbed for a long time. He stopped, breathed for a while, and then rubbed off all the dust, dirt, and dead skin on his body. Then, because he was so tired, Siddhārtha slept peacefully and carefree. When he woke up, he felt refreshed, took the dry yellow robe, wrapped it around himself, and walked towards the forest. Because his strength seemed to have used up all his last energy, he collapsed on the grass. He lay unconscious like that for who knows how long. Then a little girl, as usual, brought ghee, cakes, and fruits to offer to the gods at the base of a nearby tree. Seeing a skinny monk lying there gasping for breath, the little girl knew that this ascetic had been starving for too long and was exhausted. Moved with compassion, the little girl knelt down beside him, used a leaf as a spoon, and poured a little milk into his mouth. As the first drops of milk passed from his lips, he sipped them, passed over his tongue, down his throat, and into his stomach. A pleasant feeling slowly spread throughout his body. The little girl smiled, handing him the whole jar of milk with the lid. A moment later, he drank the whole jar of milk, and his mind returned. He said, "Thank you, niece. Where are you from? What brings you here that you have given me such a bowl of magical milk?" The little girl smiled, radiant with joy. "I live in the village. My owner, a kind lady, often sends me to the tree near the river to offer milk and cakes to the gods." Siddhārtha smiled. "Then you saw that I was about to die, so you voluntarily offered me the jar of milk. Aren't you afraid that the owner will scold you?" "No." The little girl opened her black eyes wide. "My mistress is very kind. She did not scold me, but even praised me. She often taught me, helping a hungry person or saving a dying person will bring you a lot of blessings." "Oh, good. Good job. What's your name?" "Yes, my name is Punna. My mistress is Sujatha, daughter of the millionaire Senani, who lives in the village of Senani not far away." Then all the remaining ghee, cakes, and fruits the girl offered to Siddhārtha Gautama, and he ate them slowly, little by little. Thus he recovered his health very quickly without being sick. The next day, Siddhārtha Gautama left the cave and went down to live under a shady tree by the riverbank. He decided to abandon the path of extreme asceticism and follow the middle path. Dear ladies and gentlemen, you have just listened to the video about the life of Buddha Shakyamuni, adapted from the work A Life, a Sun and Moon by Master Gioi Duc. This video series will be broadcast at 7 p.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the YouTube channel Buddhist Story. We sincerely thank you for watching. To not miss the next episodes, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. If you find the content useful, please share this video with your relatives and friends. All your comments are very valuable to us. Please leave comments below the video so we can discuss and share together. Thank you, and see you again in the next episodes of the video series, The Life of Buddha Shakyamuni.